If there's one thing that the Driveline Academy podcast is familiar with, it's deadlines.
Mm-hmm.
To all the killers and $100 billers, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dogs and cats, children, as well as babies, sycophants, scientists, engineers, carpenters. Once again, shout out to just like people running kids out there for like 100, 120 pitches in fall ball. We welcome all of you to the Driveline Academy podcast, the world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast. I'm your host, Deven Morgan, directing baseball at Driveline, founder of the Driveline Academy, and I'm joined as per usual by my brother, my partner, my co-host, Driveline Academy assistant director, Driveline Academy International Man of Mystery, Jeremy Techteal. But this time, he has not been internationally mysterying. He has gone back to the motherland.
Correct. Domestically,
yeah. Chicago was good.
Yeah, Chicago was good.
Yeah.
Chicago. It's this time of year is nice. There wasn't like snow or really cold weather.
Oh, sure.
So
yeah, we found that in January. We were in Chicago for the ABCA. And
it does get relatively cold.
We got well acquainted with that part.
Yeah.
I tried to watch some Bears football in solidarity with you because YouTube TV was doing like a free Sunday preview, whatever. They literally, and I was just like, oh, I get to watch the entirety of the Bears game. No, it was like 20 minutes. So I didn't get a chance to see the full.
Good 20 minutes, though?
No, it was a bad 20 minutes. It was when they were down 6-0.
Oh, so it was beginning of the game, 20 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Great game. Go Bears. Bear down. I love you, Caleb.
I mean, how could you not? Housekeeping, as per usual. Man, I got a new housekeeping thing I need to add. We'll have to do that for another time. Okay. So for this time, we're just going to do the standard things. This is the part of the show where we do like the live ad read for things like Driveline Academy Flex, which is your opportunity to have a youth high school player come in and do the driveline stuff and integrate that flexibly with what you're doing for your existing team. So you're going to test in our biomech lab. You're going to get programming with one of our trainers. You're going to work directly with that trainer who's going to review video and the data that you're submitting, because we are obviously the data-driven guys. So you got to use the data. We got to use it to inform your development. And you can just kind of jump into that thing basically anywhere, whether you're in season, playing fall ball. We might not necessarily recommend that, but there is a way that you could possibly get into Driveline Academy Flex and use tools like Pulse or blast bat sensors or other stuff that we have available to you to kind of quantify how playing fall ball is working for you or not. Yeah. Driveline Academy Flex, drivelinebaseball.com/flex. That's a good question.
That's a good question. Maybe
I shouldn't just throw that URL
I was going to say,
out there.
maybe this part shouldn't be in the pod.
I mean, sure, you can go to drivelinebaseball.com/flex and see what's there.
See what's there. It might redirect.
It might be the product page.
Hey, by the time we release this, we can get someone to redirect it.
That's a good point. Or you just go to drivelinebaseball.com, 425-523-4030, look into Driveline Academy Flex. Again, it's the way that we are trying to open up this mechanism of data-driven youth baseball training and development to more people than those are just on the teams in our 3 locations now.
Yeah. And one thing about that, about the flexibility of your training and adapting it to what you're doing at the time and what your team is doing, I do want people to understand that if you are playing fall ball and you sign up for Flex, you're probably not going to get, or definitely not going to get, a velo development program for your fall.
No.
While you're still playing fall ball.
Because that doesn't make sense.
Because that does not make sense. So, like, that is a thing you should know when signing up, is that when we say we fit it to match what your team is doing, we're not just going to try to push you as far as possible. We're going to take what you are doing, and we're going to make sure we don't overload you too much, and we're going to try to fit some training around that, but it might be relatively minimal amounts of training that we're able to give you. You know, recovery days sprinkled in. We could do hitting stuff. We can do some lifting stuff, but like the throwing side is really dependent on how much you're currently playing.
Yeah, and I think the best thing about that for like people that are considering flex is understand that there are ways you can get better simply by not getting as worse during the competitive season. Yeah. Right? Like that, I mean, essentially that's what you're doing, right? Is you're maintaining the skill that you might have. You do simple things like, hey, you're not going to go through a velo phase. You are going to be doing some flip and arm care though. And by virtue of doing that, I think you could make the argument that, like, hey, you're probably not going to see the velo gain, but you're not going to see yourself down 5 miles an hour at the end of your fall ball season.
And we talked about a handful of weeks ago, probably now in the pod, about making sacrifices. Yeah. And like where you are on the spectrum there, and like the reality, like I have a couple. I don't know if people on the pod know this, but I have a couple flex athletes that I train, and I am okay with them playing fall ball as long as they're okay with DHing. Right? Or playing first base, second base, maybe.
Right.
But, these are... You can have your cake and eat it, too, if you're willing to make some sacrifices. And, if your travel ball coach understands that you're trying to develop and understands that piece a little bit, maybe they're willing to work with you. And, fall ball is less important. I will only let you... I will let you play in only DH or only play second or first or whatever it is to try to have your cake and eat it too. It's I'm not going to guarantee that your coach is going to let you do that, but if you have that relationship with your coach, it is a thing that I would recommend because it's never a bad idea to get game speed hitting reps.
Yeah.
It's just how can you manage your arm workload during that time, and if you're not DHing or playing first or second, it can be difficult very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyways, if the thing you're looking for is guidance for how to navigate this often confusing landscape of how do I balance gameplay, how do I balance skill development, how do I make sure that it stays fun, you want to work with excellent trainers like my guy right here. You might not get my guy because, I need him for other things. Yeah. But anyways, hey, if you want the rest of the staff that we have here that are universally excellent, drivelandbaseball.com, 425-523-4030, Driveland Academy Flex. Succinctly, Youth Power Bat, best $79 you can spend to develop the discrete skill of moving the bat fast accurately. It's a skinny barrel. It's light. You can move it real fast. You got to move it accurately. That's a good thing. Power Bat, best $99 you can spend for the discrete skill of bat speed development. You run the program, you swing it, bat speed's going to go up, better things are going to happen when you're making contact. Okay, housekeeping done. So we're going to bring in some more guests in the coming weeks.
I was going to say, not today, right?
Not today.
Okay.
Not today.
That would have been a major shock. Normally I know some of what's going to happen, but that would have been like a, whoa. All right.
Mookie Betts is coming through the door. He's not yet. So next week, I do think we are going to have another guest externally. Not a Driveline employee or trainee, but a guy who played some big league baseball, I think is going to come in and talk to us. And I think probably sometime, I don't know, in the next week or so, we'll have Connor White come in. He wants to come in and talk about force plate data, the way that we quantify athleticism separately from skill. We're going to talk about some of the early results that we've got from our returning players who are really outperforming the predictive models that we have for kind of how they should produce force, which is solely relevant to the fact that we've been consistent about developing athleticism while you've developed skill over a long period of time. Yep. Absent those two things, though, I got some stuff.
All right.
I got some stuff. Apologies if you're big on Instagram. I'm not a big Instagram guy. I'm more of a Twitter dude. That's just, I don't know. You can probably infer from that I'm a much more comfortable writing rather than throwing my face in front of a camera and being the talking guy. I'm saying that with a flipping camera pointed at me. So I'm trying to get better at these things. I'm trying to do one video a week to kind of talk about stuff. But I was on Instagram last night. This is a long preamble to set the scene, right? I'm on Instagram. It's before my wife and I are going to sit down and watch the back half of the Vince McMahon documentary on Netflix, which has been incredible if you really want to get depressed about the sad state of other types of professional sports. And I see this a clip from a video that I've seen before of Kobe Bryant doing a talk about that's effectively revolves around practice and development. Okay. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. When they were playing, I was a McGrady guy. As I've noted on this show before, I may have to bring in some of my McGrady jerseys to really
drive that point home.
I'm not playing games. McGrady's still my guy. But I do think that the way that Kobe talked about development and youth sport and practice was really, really interesting after he retired. And then
Kobe, much better in retirement as just a figure and a human probably than he was during his playing
I think
days.
That's fair. And again, for the majority of his playing career, the Sonics were in Seattle. And I cannot root for the Trailblazers or the Los Angeles Lakers because those were like those are West Coast teams that we would be. I mean, I suppose you got the Kings and
the Clippers.
And
you were
the
never
Clips.
afraid of the Clippers?
I mean, sorry, not sorry. So I watched this Kobe thing, and I was like, I mean, this is always really interesting to me to think about, like the way that really, really high level athletes talk about practice and development, specifically when they say some stuff that's like, oh no, that's the thing I think too.
Yeah.
And then the algorithm serves me this video by this guy named Harry Mack.
Is that his real name?
It's his rap name, as far as I know.
Even better. Yeah,
yeah.
say less. Okay.
Right. So Harry Mack is a white rapper who look, my catalog of musical knowledge in that specific genre runs very deep. I've never heard of this guy before in his artistic output.
Sure.
But I have seen stuff that he's put up on Instagram that I've actually said to my kids that breaks down kind of the technical aspect of rapping.
Okay.
And he does this video that's about the process of freestyling and how you practice that.
Okay.
And he starts hitting on the same points that Kobe's talking about like skill development in athletics. And I'm like, okay, this is now I got it. Now we got a thing. Now we have a podcast topic. So like let's get into it. I actually went so far as to transcribe these videos because
look at that.
Because I think it's pertinent to it, right? So here we'll start with the Kobe one, right? And I'm just going to read the whole thing just so we can kind of set the table for it. So he goes, at 13 years old, I played the long game because my game wasn't about being better than you at 13. I wanted to be better than you. And he's talking about in the long run, right? When you know that the chips are really on the line. So when we played at 13, I would size you up and see what your strengths and weaknesses are. How do you approach the game? Are you silly about it? Are you goofy about it? Are you good at it just because you're bigger and stronger than everybody else, right? And when I played to my weaknesses. So he's talking about how he approached playing the game at 13. I played to my weaknesses. Because when you're playing summer basketball, there's so many games, so it's not a lot of skill work being done. To your point about fall ball just a second ago, right? So it's summer ball. There's not a lot of skill work being done. So when are you going to get better, right? When you're playing in competition situations, you're only playing to your strengths. Why? Because you want to win, right? So what would I do? I was working on the things during those games that I was weak at. Left-hand pull-up jumpers, right? His post game, right? So I have a strategy. And so then fast forward to when I'm 17 and my game is completely well-rounded.
Right. And
that player at 13, that's all that they did at 13 is still doing the same shit at 17. Now you got a problem, right? Mm-hmm. The S word there, I know we try to keep it clean here, but that's Kobe's. Blame Kobe, right? You can write into
R.I.P.
Yeah. And I'm sitting on my couch, and it's a Sunday afternoon, and I'm, it's like the one day at work that I don't really do any work, but all of a sudden the brain starts going, and it's like, yeah, no, this is it, man. Like this is literally it, and I think you can unpack this statement, and maybe we'll sprinkle that when we do like the social clips for this episode. We'll actually just put Kobe's talking because he's going to make his points far better than I can. But there's so many layers to this that it's like, well, number one, the awareness of being 13 years old. To even understand that, like, there's a difference between me and the way that I'm going to approach skill versus a 13-year-old whose game is just predicated on size. That's a fairly unique perspective for a 13-year-old to have.
It's a less unique perspective, I would guess, of 13-year-olds whose parents are professional athletes.
Facts. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Jelly Bean? What was his dad's name?
I think it was just, I don't remember the first name.
It was Jelly Bean Bryant, right?
Yeah, I think it was just Jelly Bean Bryant.
I mean, he had to have a real name. It was Joe.
Joe.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. And not only that part about just going like, hey, I understand the difference between myself relative to the stuff I can control and these other kids who just have a natural advantage to me. What do we see in youth baseball? And what do we see a lot at like 13 and 14? It's that exact thing. Mm-hmm. But the crazy thing to me is not only was he able to say, okay, I want to play to my weaknesses in this specific construction of like summer ball games, right?
Yeah.
Not only am I going to choose to work in competition on the stuff that I'm weak at, but also just have the awareness that like, hey, we're playing all these games. There really isn't an opportunity to develop skill.
Right.
And to see that those two things are divergent paths. I don't know in youth baseball that I really believe we have a good understanding of that at scale.
I think it's fair. Yeah.
I mean, I really, I think about conversations that I've had over the years with parents about the volume of games we're going to play.
Yeah.
And there's a real strong want for that number to be, we don't really know what the right number is, but it has to be like high enough, right? And there's kind of this like, well, we got to play enough games so that the parent is kind of satisfied that that a box has been checked.
Correct. But that tells you it's the same, it's the same concept as like we don't win enough games.
Sure.
Right? Like we don't play enough games. We don't win enough games. All right, what's the number of games we need to play where now we're playing enough games? And there's not a real answer to that.
Right.
What's the winning percentage that it'll make you as a parent comfortable? Like 60%, 70%? Like, do you have to win 90% of your games? There's no real number for either of those. And I think that's because the root problem for either of those isn't what is being discussed.
Correct. And to go so far as to say like, to acknowledge like the tacit acknowledgement that like I'm not going to generally play to my weaknesses in games because I want to win.
So it's like the example. So I have, and I'm sure this is true with several of my kids, but I don't have anybody in mind right now. But like, I got a kid who's really struggling to hit pull side fly balls.
Yeah.
Right, and like that means as a coach, I have to be comfortable with him flying out to left field in some games or right field if he's a lefty, where, there was a runner on second there. Really would have been nice to move that runner over to third. But, we're struggling to pull the ball in the air, and, like, I see you trying to work on that weakness, and that's like and, like, I don't even know the right answer there, right? Because, like, it is good to work on situational baseball as well. So, like, there's probably a balance there of, like, if there's a runner on second, I don't actually want you to try to hit pull side fly balls here.
Yeah.
Just do that with nobody on. But, I do think that another example is, hey, we have a new pitch we want to work on. Well, I don't know if I can throw it for strikes. I'm worried I'm going to hang it. Worried I'm going to leave it up in the zone and it's going to get crushed. So, you're never going to throw it in a game then.
Yep.
If you're just waiting until that pitch is perfect, you're never going to throw it in a game. Like, get competitive with it. See what works and see what doesn't work, but be willing to give up a couple runs and not worry about your game changer ERA at the end of the day. Or whether or not we won the game because you hung a curveball that you were throwing for the first time in a game.
Right, and I think that ultimately the thing that I will say with my whole chest is I feel like a majority of coaches and parents in youth baseball presume that approach to competition should be inverted. That in competition, you should only work on the stuff that you feel beyond a shadow of a doubt is going to be successful. And you shouldn't work on your weaknesses.
Right. I mean, it's like, as a coach, if I'm game planning, I don't really want to I want to put kids in a situation where they are going to develop.
Yeah.
But I also if you're really bad at doing one thing, like, I don't want to put you in that situation in a competitive environment.
Yeah.
Over and over again. Like, if we're talking defensive positions, right? Like, I've told many of the kids that I coach, like, hey, we need to get more comfortable playing different areas on defense.
Yep.
You can't just play one position and show up at high school playing one position. Am I willing to put my money where my mouth is and, like, throw them in a important tournament game in a position where, like, they don't have a ton of experience? Maybe, maybe not. But then how are they going to get that experience in a stressful environment if, like, I'm never willing to potentially give up a win? And, like, it's difficult. It's really hard.
And how do you find balance there?
Right.
How do you find balance?
Because we haven't talked about this in the pod, but, like, there have been other coaches at Driveline who have tried to, and I've done this myself, putting kids in a little weirder positions than like, hey, he's normally my shortstop. I'm playing him in right field.
Yep.
Right? Like I'm going to give some kids different chances. There, you run the real possibility, if you don't communicate that well enough, of losing the trust of some of the players because they're looking at you like, what are you doing? You're just giving away games here that we're trying to win. We're trying to be competitive and do our best.
Yep.
And you're not putting us in a good position to do that because you're putting bad defenders in premium spots or whatever it is. So it's hard to find that balance.
It's a real tricky balance. But I think it's fair to say that the need to at least find balance is disproportionately stronger at like the preteen level.
Oh, 100%.
Like that's got to be
100%.
the place.
Yeah.
And when we talk about this stuff, the first thing that always comes to mind is like the flack that I've taken as a very aggressively online baseball parent for having a child who, from the age of 8-ish, the goal was hit the ball really hard in the air. Mm-hmm. Like, just, it's a simple intention.
Yeah.
And that simple intention has produced everything from lazy fly balls to top spin grounder, like worm burners, and everything in the middle. But the intention stayed constant.
Right.
And in games, he was trying to apply the intention. And it's hard to not look at where he is now and see it as a result of compounding interest on like 7 years of us going like, hey, simple intention, simple intention, simple intention.
Over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and to a degree, I think I would say probably the same thing about pitching, honestly, because he's 15 years old. He's never had a pitching lesson.
Right. Just fill up the zone with nasty stuff, right? Like,
I mean,
hit the ball hard in the air, right? It's similar intentions.
Yeah, and when I say never, I mean never.
Yeah.
I mean never. I have never gone to a dude or a dudette and said, here's $50, $100, $150, spend an hour.
One-on-one. Right.
Never.
Right.
I've done it on the hitting side, and I've only done it on the hitting side in the last 12 months, specifically because of some stuff he was trying to navigate about changes to his swing he was trying to make last year during the high school season. And, look, I mean, that in and of itself, though, I think is a little bit of signal there that, like, the mechanism by which you get to the result is really not that important. It's like because if you're checking the box, you hit the ball hard in the air, good things are generally happening.
Right.
And
to go back to the Kobe quote.
Yeah.
I think I'd have to read the quote again or see the transcription, but it was relatively early in that quote. He basically says that those games didn't matter. And that's why he's going to work on stuff, because those games didn't matter. Where, like, I don't know if it's explicitly said or just like this is what you're supposed to infer, is that, like, eventually there are games that do matter.
Yes.
And that's what he cared about being prepared for, is the games that do matter.
Yep.
And that's, like, where it all has to come back to for a lot of these kids and parents and coaches is, like, we all have to get on the same page of what games matter. And when do games matter, when do games not matter, what games matter, what games don't. And, like, I don't think anybody would disagree with you that, like, high school varsity games matter. I don't think there's a travel ball coach out there or a youth coach out there who is saying high school varsity games don't matter. I would be interested to have a discussion with coaches who said anything below that matters.
The quote, I played the long game because my game wasn't about being better than you at 13. It was to be better than you when the chips are really on the line.
When the chips are really on the line, right? And that's, you can directly tie that to, that is high school varsity baseball, right?
Yes.
Like, where is your long-term goal? And, like, this is a really difficult conversation to have with most parents and kids because they might have two different answers.
Yeah.
Right? Mom and dad's intention of which games matter might be different than Johnny's of which games matter.
And for Johnny, the game is probably always going to matter. right? I mean, I think when we talked to David Yeager last week's pod, look, I know it's a 2-hour podcast.
It's great.
Man, David is
Could have
so
been 10.
flipping smart. Yeah. From 10 to 25, The Science of Motivating Young People is his book. Please go check it out. But he talked about that, right? That idea that, like, we have the capacity as coaches and parents and adults in the support system, people in the ecosystem, we have the ability to help these kids with context about what really matters, because the kid is always going to approach competition in a way that, like, works for their brain development, right? For their ability or lack thereof to see it as anything other than black and white, that, like, we got to check this box. We got to win this game.
Right.
And that's especially true about, like, the preteens. Mm-hmm. That's just where they are.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean as an adult you have to be subservient to your child's inability to provide context.
Right. And that's a real, like I said, it's a very difficult conversation for a parent to have with their 13-year-old child of, like, what's your ultimate goal here?
Yeah.
There's not that, honestly, probably not that many 13-year-olds that are, like, actually convicted of, I want to play college baseball.
Right.
There's probably a lot of them out there that are like, I want to play professional baseball. Okay, yeah, thanks. There's probably not a whole lot of them that are like, I want to play high-level Division I college baseball.
Yeah.
That's okay. Right? Like, the intention can change as the goal changes, and, like, as your kid gets older and matures and starts to have a little bit more specific focus, the way you train and approach competition probably should also change commensurate with that. So if you're a 13-year-old playing fall ball because your goal is, I just want to have fun with my friends, totally fine. Go play fall ball.
Okay.
Have fun.
Yeah.
If you hit 14 and now, high school's next year, now my goal has changed a little bit. I want to be like a competitive varsity player.
Yeah.
Like that's really what I want to do. Okay. So now we got to change a little bit of, now this year, maybe we shouldn't play fall ball.
Yep.
Right? Like the long-term goal has changed. Therefore, we should probably change our short-term focus in deference to that long-term goal.
Correct.
And then if that goal never changes, if your kid doesn't want to go play in college or doesn't want to go to college or, whatever the situation is, okay. Like, you can go back to playing fall ball, once you have checked those boxes of, hey, now I'm a competitive varsity player. I can go play it. Like, I don't want to go. I don't see myself advancing past this level. Great.
It's okay.
Baseball is now just supposed to be fun for you, right? Like, this doesn't have to be a training thing or you have to put in this amount of time.
Yeah.
That should be like a pretty frequent discussion that you should probably revisit often, especially with younger kids.
Yep.
Of like, what's the long-term goal? It's probably different every 6-8 months for a kid that age.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's okay. I mean, shoot, I would offer that, like, it's a good thing for kids to be able to have the autonomy to reevaluate their relationship to that goal and the choices that are to come from it.
Yeah, because then they have ownership of it.
Yeah, man. Like,
so it's like going to be easier to make that choice of like, oh, I got to throw my pulse sensor on and go through a recovery day today.
Yeah.
Even though I don't want to and I have a bunch of homework, like,
yeah,
this is what my programming is, and like I don't want to miss a day of programming. And okay.
Yeah, I had a kid that I coached for many, many, many years in rec ball. He stopped playing when he was 12, like a lot of kids do. I saw him last year at one of my daughter's wrestling meets. So he would have been about to turn 17. I think he's a January. I don't know. Anyways, he's either late 16, early 17. But he's about to go into his senior year.
About to be a senior. Yeah.
And he comes up to me and he's like, we're just talking yada yada, and he's like, hey, like, do you think I can make the high school team next year? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, of course you can.
What?
Of course you can. It's like, well, what do I do? I was like, man, Trav, you just got to go play catch with your dad. Just start there.
Yeah.
He stopped playing when he's 12. He's now 17, and he's, toying with the idea of coming back to the game. I'm not going to go like, all right, well, hey, we got to get you on Oregon State's radar.
Right.
So,
right.
It's not that.
Oh, welcome back. Here's 6 days a week of training.
Yeah, like he's playing football, so he's lifting. It's just like, man, just play some catch with your dad.
Right.
Show for the tryout. Hope that you probably don't forget all of how to play baseball.
Right.
And he was a good ball player when he was 12. So like, and it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
You're a senior. You go to a good high school. The odds that they're going to cut you as a senior who like actually can put a glove on his hand and knows technically how to play the game, you're going to be fine. Are you going to be a starter? No.
Right.
Like, no. But that you don't have to be. It's and I, the thing for me is that, like, when he stopped playing, I was like, when he was 13, I was like, oh, come play intermediates, come down to drive line. Like, I mean, I did. I played that because I saw him as a 12-year-old kid who had, like, he still had a crap ton of potential. But very clearly, it didn't resonate with him. And that's okay.
Totally.
And that's okay.
But then that goal changes.
Yes. And that works on the other side too, right? Like, I know kids right now who are trying to juggle the demand of, like, early captain's practice versus coming down here.
Right.
And it's a tricky thing relative to everything that Colby that Kobe talks about in that quote, right? Because some of these players do have the bigger goal.
Right.
And they see pretty clearly, like, hey, if I have an opportunity to choose between something that really is like, I'm putting a deposit in the bank versus a captain's practice, which has all the value in the world for, like, getting the team together, making sure that the team kind of functions well, both in a tactical sense and also just, like, as young men. There's value on both sides of that. Sure. But one of these things is kind of like the value for this thing just kind of decays once you get out of high school. If you have that bigger goal, it's tough. It's tough to kind of go, man, hey, I'm not coming to captain practice today, because I think the thing that matters the most to me, is when I show up next year, I throw 85 or I throw 90 or I hit balls 95 or like whatever it is. That's a tough thing to do. So, anyways, I thought that Kobe, I know that you listen to this show and I keep saying your name, so hello.
You're not as good at basketball as Kobe, though.
You're for sure not as good at basketball as Kobe Bryant. So I see the Kobe Bryant thing, and I was like, oh, that really. And then the Instagram algorithm serves me this. So Harry Mack is talking about the technical idea of, like, how you practice freestyling, and he says this: practicing is not just doing the thing. A lot of people might assume that, like, to practice freestyling, you just freestyle a lot every day, and that's practice. He goes, I am of the strong belief that that's not actually practice, although it is valuable. I mean, if you do freestyle for 2 hours every day, will you get better? Yes, of course you're going to get better. Inevitably, you'll get better over time. But if you want to do anything at an elite level, I think you need to make time to actually practice. And what I mean when I say actually practice, it's identifying weaknesses, and then it's creating exercises with firm rules. Essentially creating little games for yourself that are aimed at chipping away at specific weaknesses so that you can improve them. Yeah. And I was like, oh, no, this is just him. He's talking about the exact same thing that Kobe's talking 100%. About. It's literally the same thing. So, and he gets a little bit more technical on this side, and I think it's pertinent to kind of understand what we're talking about here. He goes, and so practice is highly regimented. You have a specific goal in mind, and you create parameters so that it's very clear to what you're doing in the exercise, if you're achieving the goal or not. And this, to me, is just like, that's hit tracks, man. That's an intended zones bullpen. It's literally the same thing as what we do on skill development. And if you're not able to achieve the goal at a decent percentage, then you have to simplify the exercise. Hey, I can't sniff an 80-mile-an-hour heater right now. Maybe dial the machine down to 75, keep the goal the same. Right. So it's like you're constantly trying to slowing things down, shaving away excesses so you can get the right thing that you're trying to work on. Blah, 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 blah. Some of this is very, like, rapidy rap specific. I don't know that that's super pertinent to our audience, so I'll get a little bit ahead of things here. So he goes, blah, 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 blah. And so practice doesn't always sound great in terms of, like, the audio part.
Yeah,
of,
what
like,
I sound like.
Someone freestyle, right? Practice doesn't always sound great because it's not a performance. And then the performance, on the other hand, is when you're bringing everything together in real time without the regimented structure of the practice that he created. And there are no rules. So the best way to sort of summarize this is Charlie Parker, a great bebop saxophonist, the inventor of bebop. Legend has it said that he said something like this: practice your scales, practice your chords, and then forget all that shit and just play. And I think that gets to like the very specific mechanism that we practice. We practice in a data-driven environment that constantly is sending feedback to our kids about what's working and what isn't, what they need to work on. We have great coaches who are there with them and provide stewardship over that experience. Hey, do you think you were over under that pitch? Hey, what was your ball flight target? Hey, what did you feel there?
Yeah.
Right? That's stewardship over like an intrinsic learning environment. But then when we do live ABs, hey, just play.
Right.
Right? Forget the chords, forget the scales, just play. When you put on a belt and a cap and a uniform, hey, just play. I understand that in baseball, we are always going to be like swimming uphill at this perception that there's like a way that you can solve the skill for this game. That you can sit on a tee and you can groove the swing, that you can sit on a mound and do like towel drill throws or dry reps or whatever other nonsense. But I honestly think that the thing that like actually matters is how much of a void can you be in when it comes time to compete with a very simple objective, and then you react to that as best as possible.
Right. I was having a conversation with one of our coaches last week. Well, I guess no, it was last week. It was right before I left, and they noticed that I give extremely external cues and rarely ever anything internal.
Oops.
And it was, do you feel that there's any points where your players need more specificity? I was like, yes, I do. And you may not hear me give those specific points, but like while they're in a round, it doesn't do them any good for me to constantly tell them what they're doing wrong.
Yeah.
Because I can't do that in a game. So like I want to give them a cue and see how they internalize that cue and what adjustments they try to make. Okay, kid is constantly hitting the ball on the ground. Okay, hey, hit a pop-up.
Yep.
Right? Get the ball off the ground. Okay? And then I get to watch that kid's thought process. And instead of me telling him, hey, this is the adjustment I need you to make to get it off the ground, I can watch him do it. So I can know what he's thinking I'm trying to tell him.
Yeah.
Where his head is going through that process.
Yep.
Then I can help him change his thought process in making that adjustment.
Yeah.
As opposed to just like force feeding him adjustments all the time.
Yeah.
It's teaching him how to think about the feedback he's getting and how to make those adjustments a little faster. Because, yeah, I just want you to go out and compete when you're in a game.
Yeah.
And be able to make those adjustments without a coach yelling at you constantly. Or me yelling at you constantly, or redirecting you back to oh, I missed under the ball. I should probably, try to hit this ball on the ground.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, my body now knows what it. When I say in my head is now telling my body how to make that adjustment in the right way, as opposed to like the 4 things my coach taught me to remember.
Yeah.
Or is yelling at me from the third base box.
Yeah, it's like I feel like somewhere along the line, self-organization somehow got like a bad rap in baseball. It feels like I don't think people understand what self-organization means. Yeah, and I think that's what I'm getting at. Is I think there was just this thought that like we're just it's like, as someone that believes in a constraint-led approach,
right?
As someone who believes in this concept of self-organization, that like the mechanism by which that we coach through that lens is, well, just hit a home run,
right?
And like, I might say that,
right?
Like I might legitimately say that,
right?
But you might also say the other thing, and you might be highly intentional about picking spots to give them kind of, hey, what's our target? What's the feel? What's the cue? And then you might have other targets or other opportunities that you just kind of like, you want to see how they do it.
Right.
And that, again, that's stewardship to me. Like that's stewardship of the experience. It's like, I will never ever forget, Max Gordon, Driveline Triple OG talking about coaching here. And he was just like, I'm not in the third base box.
Right.
I'm not. I work with these guys, or if it's college or if it's pro off season, and then they have to go out to their teams. And I have to equip them with not only like the intentional skill design
Right.
and skill improvement that we're going to work on, but also the perspective and mindset, I guess, to like triage for themselves how that's going.
Right.
You have to.
And I saw that firsthand last year. For the first time in years, my kids played for somebody who wasn't me.
Yeah.
And we didn't do terribly during the high school season, but we struggled to adjust. Like, we struggled to make adjustments by and large. Most of my athletes struggle to make adjustments in game because their coaches are yelling a lot of different things at them and telling them all these different things. And, like, they're trying to do what their coach is telling them while also, you know, trying to be a freshman playing high school baseball for the first time.
Yeah.
And it's, if they can't do that on their own, or if they don't have some semblance of what that means to do on their own,
You're lost.
they're lost whenever they don't play for me.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be their coach forever. Yep. So the best thing I can do is teach them how I think so that they can think a little closer to how I think. Right? And that, you know, honestly, a lot of times looks like, hey, you take one swing or first 2-3 swings in a round, everything's on the ground, and I'm telling you, all right, put the ball in the air. Come on. I don't want to see this crap on the ground anymore. Put the ball in the air.
Yeah.
Then they finish their round of 8-10 swings, whatever it is. They come back and they're feeding the machine. And I'm like, okay, hey, this is what I saw you do.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I asked you to put the ball in the air, and this is the adjustment that I saw you made. Did you understand that that's what you were doing? And then we can talk about, oh, well, this is what I was actually trying. When you said put the ball in the air, this is what I was trying to do. I definitely see what you were trying to do there. That makes a lot of sense to me now that I know where your thought process is going. This is what I want you to try next time.
Yeah.
Right? But it doesn't happen in the middle of the round.
No.
While they're going, you know, trying to be rapid fire so we can get efficiency and high rep volume.
I mean, and a lot of that stuff is actually probably happening in the drill work.
Right.
Right? That's happening in a completely different cage.
Right. But this is the focus of, like, working on weaknesses as opposed to working on strengths. And, like, yeah, I wish, well, actually I don't, but, like, the kids wish that every swing was just a top eighth, 15 to 25 degrees, like, missile. And it's not. But if they don't really understand the point of practice and training is to hammer your weaknesses and focus on that, then it can feel like round after round, I suck.
Yeah.
Because I can't do the thing that I'm really good at. Well, I don't want you to do the thing you're good at. You're good at that already. Don't practice that.
Yeah.
Practice the thing you're not good at.
Yeah, and I think the thing I would really want to hammer home to anybody that's listening, you need to understand that, like, there's so many layers to this same concept that the application is the same. You could have 8 through 12-year-olds who need to practice just the most basic, simple things.
Right.
Be on time, move the bat fast, hit the ball hard.
Right.
You could have 15, 16, 18-year-old kids who need to practice something that's much more nuanced, right? How do I make sure that I don't spin off like the middle pitch or middle in pitch, right? How do I make sure that I get flush contact on something that's like top shelf in the zone? How do I make sure that I can find a solid oppo barrel on something that's like down away? In the mechanism by which you practice all of those things is the same. You have to lean into the stuff that you're not good at.
That you're not good at, right?
And you know, I mean, we did a message. I did a message to the Academy families last week. Was talking about how we're moving into, you know, we're going to more retest, right? Like we're retesting, we're going to hitting mocaps. And it was like, hey, maybe the programming is going to change. Maybe it doesn't need to.
Maybe it doesn't, right?
Maybe it doesn't need to. And if the programming is still laser focused on the meat and potato stuff that you need to be like a competent mover, then hey, why would we deviate from that?
Right.
I mean, does it make you feel like, and again, we have to confront, I think, the economic reality of the fact that we take checks from parents to train kids. Does it make you feel as the check writer more seen if I tell you like every 3 weeks, oh, we're doing this drill now, or we're doing this drill now, or this drill now? Let me ask a more basic question. Does your kid know how to hinge? Can your child hinge?
Right.
Because if the answer is no, and they can't hold a hinge, and they can't rotate through that hinge, then guess what? There's more ROI on us still being like laser focused on the big leverage thing.
Right.
Right? That's just the truth of the matter. It doesn't mean that there aren't other things. It just means that, again, like Colby is saying, or oh my Lord, like Kobe Bryant is saying, like Harry Mack is saying, you have to design practices that revolve actively around the things that you need to get better at.
Yep.
And you know, I think the only thing that we're layering on here is that like it does make sense to have that focus for young kids on the big ticket stuff.
Yes.
Right? Like that's just the greatest ROI.
Yeah, until they hit certain metrics, right? And I tell all the kids this, like, there's no way mechanically that I can get you throwing 85 miles an hour if you weigh 140 pounds and struggle to separate your hips and shoulders.
Yeah.
While you're throwing. Like that
Yep.
There's just nothing I can do
that way.
Right. Like, you have to gain more weight. You have to be a better athlete. Sure. We're going to make some mechanical changes. We're going to work on some drills. It's not going to get you throwing 85.
No.
Like, you're not going to gain 10 miles an hour with a couple mechanical tweaks. That is, like, long-term attacking your weakness, which most kids don't want to hear this, or parents definitely don't want to hear this, but, like, your weakness is you're a bad athlete. It's your athleticism.
They really don't want to hear that, but like,
right.
man, guys,
but it's true.
It's true.
And like, that's the biggest thing we can attack. More so than your mechanics is like, you're a bad athlete, you're weak, and like, you have to change that before any of this other stuff really matters at all.
You know, who's that 17-year-old kid that had the amazing catch this last weekend in college?
Ryan Williams.
Oh my Lord.
You said 17-year-old kid? There's no
17-year-old man.
Grown man.
Grown ass man.
Yeah.
You know, Danny sent me that play.
And
I was just like, the movement, the athletic and movement competency here, this is art.
That dude could have been playing
art.
high school baseball against your kid last year.
Yes.
There are kids who technically, in theory, have that body composition playing against your son
100%.
in varsity baseball, and you're going to compete at 138 pounds?
And that's art.
Uh-huh.
Like that to me is art, no different than Charlie Parker talking about bebop.
Right.
Because in that moment, when he spins in the air to catch the ball, starts carving towards the end zone on like a positive diagonal, it's like, psych, zip that way.
Yeah.
You can't practice that.
No.
I don't think that you can practice that. I think you can practice component pieces of it.
Right.
But when it comes to time to play, man, you have to play.
Right. That's not a thing where in that split second he is thinking about where his body is in space and trying to like make mechanical move. No, he's just being an athlete and reacting.
And I know I'm going to be 48 next year. I know that if the demo of the people that are in this that most listen to this
we're
podcast,
in a different demo.
You and I are in a different demo. If you're one of my people, shout out to the class.
I'm coming for your demo though. I'll be there soon.
Shout out to, I know you are. Shout out to the class of 1995. If you're in this demo, I understand that we grew up with a version of baseball that didn't revolve around this stuff, right? It didn't look that way. And I have, again, all the esteem in the world for the men that played that game in that era because they were still the best that we had. But like a lot of those dudes were very good at the skill, and I'm not sure that they were athletically as good as they possibly could have been.
Right.
So then I see this clip a couple days ago of a fly ball hit to Cedric Mullins in the outfield. Actually, let me clarify. A fly ball hit to the right center gap.
Okay.
It's not hit to Cedric Mullins. And he just makes the most amazing beeline towards it, catches it while flying through the air, and it's like, yeah, man, that's just Major League defense right now. That's what it is. It is elite athleticism deployed at a very simple problem, which is I need to catch this ball before it falls.
Right.
And again, you can put deposits into that bank account. But you have to do it consistently. You have to do it over a very long period of time, and you have to build it up from mostly nothing, specifically when it comes to kids. So when we start talking about whether it's the Kobe Bryant quote or whether it's Harry Mack, you start talking about like practicing your weaknesses. we have a little over 300 kids in our ecosystem, right? Yep. So presumably in the world, we have 300-ish kids who are getting some version of programming that specifically attacks their weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think about a way that I can frame this without like putting a big target on a large organization, but like think about your national travel teams. What does their programming and their practice and their training look like to target anybody's weaknesses? Is it that? Or do we just get on a plane and we go fly someplace and we play a game?
Well, and when the goal is winning, what choices are being made to shield you from exposing your weaknesses at a high level or in an important moment where, like, okay, you can hide them right up until you can't anymore, and then it's just all over, and you don't really get the opportunity to try to adjust that. And we had
because now you're on the back foot,
right? And I won't name the team, but we had an NBA team come visit us.
Yeah, a couple years
ago. Yeah. Jesus, we're old. It's a while ago, and there was a very interesting discussion that was had about development in that'll go on the pod in America versus international.
Yes,
and this was like, it was a couple years ago. It wasn't an insanely long time ago, but it was like a slightly different. Like, basketball is much more international now, right? Yes. This was pre-Luka and some of those guys, pre-Jokic winning MVPs, and like all they do is highlight reel stuff in America.
Yeah, right.
If someone isn't, and like a good example of this is now I'm getting deep into NBA, so sorry if you don't like basketball on the podcast, but like Jaylen Brown. Mm-hmm. Boston Celtics superstar. I'll call him a superstar.
It's fair.
He's an NBA champion now. For years, people crapped on him because he couldn't dribble. Like, just not obviously he could dribble. He's in the NBA. But, like, not an elite level dribbler.
Not a great handle.
Right. That is a thing that he got way better at by working at it every offseason.
Yeah.
Right? He didn't really attempt to do that until he got to the NBA because he didn't have to. Because these guys get away with, at the youth level, just elite athleticism, jumping over people, dunking over people, doing whatever they need to. And then when the playing field is even, they no longer have that ability to out-athlete their competition.
Yep.
And now skill comes into it, and, well, we might be getting our butts kicked a couple of times by guys who are way less athletic than us, but have more skill development. So, like, you do have to pair the two, but, like, it is always way easier if you start with a really high floor of athletic ability then I'm going to be perfect at mechanics and totally neglect the athleticism piece. Yeah. Because that's the difference between, like, I don't know, Jaylen Brown and someone who's not in the NBA because they weren't a good enough athlete to be there in the first place. So, like, it doesn't, like, they're playing in Europe, right? Like, they're, I don't know, I was going to name a random college basketball player, but, like, a guy who, hey, man, you can do all of the things on a court. You just don't have the explosive athleticism to beat today's NBA defenders. Hey, man, your actions look great on a baseball field. You don't hit the ball hard enough to find outfield grass nowadays because, man, those outfielders are tracking that ball down.
Yep.
The older you get, the better the defense gets. And if you're not hitting the ball hard, you're going to have a harder time finding holes in a better defense.
And it's just, and this is why I wanted to talk about practice today, because you need to understand the landscape of, like, all the things you need. Mm-hmm. You just have to. And, look, we have professional baseball players that play 162 games a year. And if there's one class of athlete that you could kind of give a pass for having a hard time to find time to practice, it's probably them. Mm-hmm. But, hey, man, every October, teams don't make the playoffs and our gyms fill up because they still are trying to get better at it.
Every September, teams get eliminated and you see players start to tinker with some stuff in-game.
Yep.
Because it matters less.
Yeah.
And I hope I've been a part of organizations that have told players, look, we're eliminated. This is a great time to work on stuff.
Yep.
Like, the results of the game don't matter anymore. The goal has now changed.
Yeah.
right? Our goal is not to win this game anymore because it doesn't really matter. It's not going to move the needle for anybody. Our goal is to put you in a better spot going into next year.
Yeah. And look,
And
man,
that should just be the goal of all non-high school baseball and college baseball.
That's what I was just going to say. It's just like I will go to my grave saying that, like, you know, the results of anything pre-high school and youth baseball, they just don't matter.
And even
they
like
just
high school
don't matter.
travel ball.
Yeah.
Like, that should be a time where, hey, I just finished my high school season. Here is what I feel like I didn't do well in our high school season. Like, what I really need to work on and what I want to show up next year and tell my coach, like, I'm better at this. Well, at least for our program, the next time you play games, the only games you play between the end of your high school season and you showing up to tryouts are summer ball.
Yep.
So if you want to game test some of this stuff, some of this new development stuff, you have a finite window to do it. It's over the summer. Now, we can do a ton over the off season, but it's not necessarily going to be high stress, high pressure game-like environments because that's a really hard thing to recreate on like a weekly basis or whatnot. But like, why is that not the goal of summer ball?
Yeah.
Why do any of us care about winning these games when, like, you're a freshman or a sophomore and, like, you didn't light the world on fire as a freshman on varsity and there's things you need to work on? Okay, great. What are they? Let's do them.
And, you know, and I'm just thinking about, like, youth baseball coaches I know who are, like, they're counting their wins.
Yeah.
You're missing the forest for the trees. I just drives me nuts. You got a MLB segment for this week? Other than the Chicago White Sox?
Well, so I was home this week. All right, I was in Chicago this week, and lots of parts of me really wanted to go to a White Sox game on like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to see them, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to see them set the record for the worst baseball team who's ever taken a field professionally. I talked myself out of it, and man, am I glad I did because they couldn't even do that right. They won 5 out of their last 6 games. So, like, you know, they did it eventually in Detroit. But yeah, they couldn't even do that part right. Of like, so, like, you know, I guess the result there is like you'll always be disappointed. Like, always be disappointed, I guess. I don't.
Yeah. Baseball's always just It's going to find a way to stab you in the heart. That's
even the worst team of all time is going to win 5 out of 6 and totally ruin any chance you have of seeing history.
Yeah, that's brutal. I do have one thing I want to end on. My buddy Evan, who's been a long time. I mean, he's just a friend. You know, like we started talking on Twitter years and years ago. He was very, very gracious about kind of like promoting. I think the approach we had was very different. His son Aiden played baseball for a long time. Decided he kind of had enough. Went to go do the hockey thing for a while, and now he's coming back to baseball. And like the kid's got juice. He's still
hockey, rotational sport.
Yeah, super weird. I would have to guess, Evan, you can correct me, and I would guess that Aiden has got to be 13 or 14 now, but he's hitting balls like 88. Like,
seems good.
Yeah,
seems good.
Yeah. I mean, he's got juice. But he sent me a message, and he was like, "Can you write a tweet about how to help a kid who's lost some of his confidence, and advice you give the dad trying to help remind him to just go out and have fun?" And Evan, I'm going to give you podcast time and not a tweet because this is I think it's a better format for it. And the first thing I would say is, like, relevant to everything we just kind of talked about the need for practice, about the need for practice to be focused on the holistic sum of everything you need to work on, about a need to kind of lean into your weaknesses. None of it matters. None of it matters. The end goal matters a lot. I think the process by which you get there matters a little, except you need to be able to tolerate it. Right? Like, you have to work through that stuff. And, you know, again, I mean, baseball is a game that's a heck of a lot of fun when you're good, and it stinks when you stink. Or maybe you don't stink, right? Maybe you just aren't getting the results that you want. And, you know, again, the first thing that I would offer to you, my good friend Aiden, is like, hey, man, you took some time off from our sport. So understand that, like, you have the aspiration in the world, all the aspiration in the world to try to do this thing the way that you're accustomed to. It might take some time. right? And when Evan and I first started talking about kind of how hitting was going, I was like, hey, is he not swinging at hittable pitches? Is he generating bad contact? Like, what's the deal? And he's like, it's kind of both. And I was like, okay, yeah, man, it's probably a lot of that is rust. But the number one thing that I would say is just like the result matters a heck of a lot more than the destination. Specifically, even in this environment, right? Like the odds that, coaches are going to pay attention to the game results of 13 and 14-year-old kids at this point, with the rules that are in place, with the portal.
Yeah.
Like, why would you?
No, they don't. Yeah.
Why would you? I mean, Pro Scout.
No, they don't.
Right.
It's crazy.
So if that's true, then to me, this really kind of just ends up being a little bit of a perseverance play.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, who's going to stay diligent and dedicated and focused and love it long enough so that you can practice all the stuff you need to open up the door for, like, the competitive experience you want.
Right.
And I don't know. I mean, again, we're probably in horse glue land at this point, because I think for me, it all comes back to love. Like, it just comes back to, do you love it enough to persevere enough? Because if you do,
I'm incredibly convicted that any kid, probably 15 would be my cutoff, like 15U, like a freshman. Anybody, a freshman or younger, can play college baseball if you actually love it and are willing to train hard to do that thing.
you can find a place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is like one of those sports, maybe the only one, that you can actually improve those skills enough.
Yep.
Like, and that's cool. But it does, it's how good am I, right?
Yep.
It, instead of like testing how tall you are and how good your genetics are, it's like, okay, what do you got? What's inside? Like, how much do you want this? How much are you going to go sacrifice to go get this thing?
Yeah.
I think that's cool.
And the answer to that question might not always be that you do want to persist through all this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's okay, man.
I just had that conversation with a kid last week. It is totally okay for your ultimate goal. I don't care how good you are. You could be hitting balls 100 miles an hour, and if you don't want to go to college, you have no interest in playing professional baseball.
Yeah.
Okay, your goal can be to play varsity high school baseball, and like once you've reached that goal, you can plateau a little bit and get a little comfy and do whatever else you want in life. It's your life. Go live it.
Go to the captain's practice.
Right. Go live it. Do whatever you want, as long as you know what your goal is and you're okay with it.
Yeah. But if you start to kind of connect the other dot, which is I do want to try to play this thing in college, then like I think the most important thing you need to do is you need to fall in love with not only the action but the process. Mm-hmm. And again, if you want to deep dive on this, Evan, if you haven't listened to it, a couple episodes ago, we just did the whole thing about process. I suppose this episode inadvertently is kind of about process too. But Aiden, I think you got to fall in love with the process. And to make that a little bit more real and actionable and not just like some weird Zen voodoo BS that an old person is saying to you, think about every competitive experience you have on a baseball field as an opportunity to learn something about yourself. Did that go the way that I wanted to? Yes. Why?
I would take you one further, and every day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Not just every experience you have, but like every single day.
Yeah.
You have the ability to reflect on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think you're 100% right. Yeah. You're right. Because then what we're trying to do is get you to kind of understand that like this process perspective is a thing that's going to inform your whole life.
Right.
And it has application in baseball right now because there's stuff in baseball that you want to work on that you can get better at, and you will if you stay persistent about doing it. Mm-hmm. If you can apply this process perspective to it to understand what you need to work on at a deeper level, hey, I'm on top of middle fastballs. I'm punching balls in the ground. I'm not letting my bat speed play as much as it normally would. Okay, fine. If you understand that, that's the first step to making the correction. But if you recoil from that experience because you didn't do the way that you wanted to, and that made you feel crappy about yourself, then it's really hard to get to like the procedural understanding part.
Right. Your mind is no longer really open.
Yep.
If you're really frustrated, you have less, it's just, you inherently have less of an open mind of being able to make changes and adapt if all you're feeling is frustration.
Yep. So, I guess to wrap it up, the thing I would say to you, man, is your dad loves you, your brothers love you, your mom loves you, your family loves you. If you can love yourself through these competitive experiences that aren't necessarily the ones that you want, but understand that if you can unpack that experience, the result, and turn it into something that happened as a result of actions that you took, and that those actions are modifiable, then it's all about just accumulating as many of them as you can.
Right.
So you have more opportunities to learn. You have more opportunities to practice what you need to work on. And, man, you're going to get closer to the truth of how good you can possibly be.
Yep.
I think just fundamentally that's the stuff it comes down to. I know you got the juice, dude, so just keep playing. Yeah, that's all I got.
That's all I got.
Okay, so next week, special surprise guest.
Yes. Not for me. I know. I actually know.
Yeah. Special surprise guest number 2. The pod is growing up. We're bringing in new people. It's not just us, going on ad nauseum about whatever it is that we have for you, but we like to do that sometimes too.
Correct.
Man, I really think, we have a pretty great opportunity to improve the way that we practice, and that's just going to help everybody get better in the game and get more out of it. So we should probably do that. That's all I got for you. I am Deven. He is Jeremy. We are Down by Law. Catch you next time. Thanks. Bye.